You're listening to Lucid Cafe. I'm your host, Wendy Halley. Aloha to you. I got a fun one for you today. I really enjoyed my conversation with my guest, Debra Silverman. And it truly was a conversation, which is a tribute to the high degree of comfort she has with herself and her genuine desire to connect. As you'll soon discover, Debra is quite a powerhouse. Her enthusiasm and zest for life, completely contagious. When Debra was just 20 years old, she met an astrologer who blew her mind and changed her world forever. She had officially been introduced to the world of astrology. It was then that she realized the stars in her own world had aligned just right, and she had found her life's purpose. Debra went on to deeply study the mind and body, earning a bachelor's degree in psychology and dance from York University and a master's degree in clinical psychology from Antioch University. Over the past 40 years of professional experience and private practice, she has specialized in helping thousands of individuals achieve emotional health and wisdom based on their unique personality and the four elements: water, air, earth, and fire. Please enjoy my conversation with Debra Silverman. Thanks, Debra, so much for coming on the show.
That's my pleasure.
So you have a new book.
Yes.
The Missing Element: Inspiring Compassion for the Human Condition. How did you come to write this book?
It wrote me, is what it feels like. I think it was cooking for so many years. It lived underneath, and I think anyone who's written a book will tell you, while it may take a certain length of time, it's really years in the making. So it was an answer to me trying to create a model of the four elements that was transferable by telling stories, because people get bored when it's too academic. And my whole life work is experiential, putting things in the body. So I did the book so you could read it like sitting on an airplane and you can't stop. I was very deliberate about writing it. So it was compelling and it was juicy and it was small bite-sized bits and it worked.
Yeah, I love the way it's formatted. It is in little bite-sized chunks and it's just graphically, it's set up in ways that is appealing to the eye. It's not just text. There's lots
of pictures
and
I wanted lots of pictures, and there's lots of very cool photographs in there. Yes, that was my intention.
Well, tell me a little bit about your work. What is it that you do?
I'm a psychotherapist of over 40 years and an astrologer over 40 years. So I've combined astrology with psychology to assist people to fall in love with who they are and therefore create compassion. Because once you understand that you're a little strange, because everyone's a little strange, there's no one on the planet that didn't get the strange button, but they try to act normal. So my job is to make weird normal, so you don't feel like you're separate or you're different, but rather the book assists you to go, oh, no wonder I talk all the time, or no wonder I never talk. But whatever those personality traits are that you're always wishing would go away, they become your allies and they become your friends.
Well, I love that perspective, making friends with the more shadowy aspects of ourselves, which I think that's key, definitely in the work that I do. That's an interesting combination of psychotherapy and astrology. I don't think I've heard of that combination.
Yeah, well, Carl Jung. So this is the surprise. Carl Jung was an astrologer, and his whole model, which was a mandala, everything was mandalas and the unconscious mind and unpacking what occurs in the dream world. So Carl Jung had a model. He was unfortunately not allowed to tell people he was an astrologer because astrology has a bad name. But as years went by, he was quoted to say, psychology will be a dinosaur science without astrology, because as an astrologer, you understand the human psyche in a place of compassion. And as a psychologist, you get to hear everything that went wrong. So it's like the combination of, so how did your life unfold that made the tangles or got you all twisted? Well, what was the intention of spirit when they designed you? So I'm working with the two. It seems so obvious to me that they're best friends, that you would want to ask these hard questions as a therapist. Did you love your mother? And what happened with your dad? And what happened? And then as an astrologer, the question is, what was the karma that you were sent down here with that compounded the circumstances, and then how do we become the observer or the witness? So we're not captured by the drama and the saga and the wounding and the trauma and the, oh my God. So my job is to help people get up and out of that, said the astrologer. Look back at your story from compassion and then liberate yourself. Like, how do I free myself from those personality traits that I thought my dad put in place, but actually my chart put them in place? And then once I understand that there's this deep relaxation or a quality of acceptance, people fall in love with themselves right in front of me. They take off all their clothes, they undo their chart, they're naked, and I'm like, oh, look how pretty you are. You have to close your eyes, of course, to see the stars or to see the dark part. It's to your point. There's a shadow that's beautiful that we neglect.
Right. You're not actually having people take their clothes off.
No, but I just like saying it. No, don't worry. You don't take your clothes off. I know. I just like to twist things to tickle people. Yeah. You can leave your clothes on if you want to become an astrologer.
So are you like pulling clients, their charts up right then and there?
Oh, yeah. Carl Jung as well. Every single session Carl Jung did, he had a chart in front of him. Same for me. And I've trained many therapists. There's lots of therapists in our circle. I mean, I have a large organization of women who came in like you as a practicing therapist and then realized, whoa, this is a shorthand. Like, instead of being able to make what's wrong about your character, your client, I can ask what's right about it based on their chart. And suddenly there's this voice of like, really? That's why I do what I do? And there's permission. I give out permission slips. So as a therapist, that's basically what we do. We assist people to feel better about the shadow.
Right. Absolutely. And that's one of the things that I wanted to point out right from the get-go in your new book. You talk about the importance of healing yourself. A lot of us are focused on, we need to heal the planet. We need to heal
politics.
Yeah, all of the systems that are in chaos. But really, the idea of healing yourself. I'm a longtime shamanic practitioner, and one of my visionary experience that really stood out to me years ago was when I met with the spirit of the earth. And the goal of the exercise was to ask her what she needed. And when I met her, she was quite an amazing presence. I could go on for days just describing how I perceived her, but the main gist of what she was saying to me was that she says, I'm going to be fine. I'll be fine. Don't worry about me. She said, my human children need to heal themselves, because then if you heal yourself, you're going to interact with each other and me differently. And then she went into the whole idea of activism is like a distraction from your own stuff, which I thought was really interesting that she phrased it that way.
I spend a lot of time with the elements. I spend a lot of time on my knees in the earth. My whole life's work is embodiment. So when you talk about the earth spirit, or you have a direct encounter with that energetic, it's exactly what that book is about. The book is about entering into, specifically, back to your point, personally, what element, because we can't live without water. You can't spend a day without air, or a moment. You get how much time? Like within seconds, the brain stops working. You can't live without the heartbeat. That's fire. And you can't live without food. So these four elements are so intrinsic. And to your point, when you have a relationship, when you have a direct experience with the spirit of earth, or the spirit of the wind, or the spirit of water, and you really have given yourself kinesthetically to it, it's a lot different than living in our heads. I think one of the handicaps for all of us therapists, all of us that love podcasts and love psychology, is we get stuck in our head. And the art of this lifetime is the physical plane, is the humility of saying, what? We get to wake up in the morning and have hot tea, and then we get to meet the day and check off our list. This is so fun. And then we get to have red wine at the end of the day and sip on that hot stuff that makes and then we get to go make love. Like, this is where life goes, whoa, 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 whoa. But most of us just live in, I don't know what happens when you turn into a grown up. Everything gets subdued. It turns into,
I would say the frontal lobe kicks in.
Yeah. Why does it take up so much space? It's like, what?
I think it's a Western problem, right? Because we're so in our heads.
I know, it's so sad. I know, in the Hopi Indians, when I was introduced to the Hopi Indian prophecy at a very young age, and because I had an elder who was my teacher, and one of the things that they taught me was, in the symbol of the present day man or woman, it's a stick figure, and the head is disconnected from the body. That's the indicator that we're in the modern day, where the olden time was the head was hooked up to the body. And in fact, there was a stick in their hand walking on the earth, and there was a feather in their head hooked up to the heavens. But the feather's gone, the stick is gone, the head is disassociated from the body, and there's this breakdown where we are no longer humans that actually are embodied. So everything I do, from the smells I wear to the food I eat to the conversation, I'm always trying to like eat this life alive, like chew. So, my whole thing with astrology is, boy, can you get lost in your head. There's so much information in astrology. The sky's the limit, so to speak. That was a pun. And then my life's work in that book, The Missing Element, is how do you get the elements back into your life in a concrete, visceral way? So you can ask yourself, can you cry? Like people that are missing water, they don't know how to cry. They get into ice cubes. They freeze. And so they see a sad film, they'll cry, but not in their own personal life. They've lost their tear ducts, especially for men. Or they've lost air. They don't have the ability to socialize anymore. They don't want to date. They don't want to go out and meet people because they're like, people are bugging me. Or the earth people, they forgot how to take care of their taxes in their car, in their closet. They've lost relationship with the pristine world of eating well. Or fire, they lose their fun factor. They forget about passion and orgasms, and they forget about laughing and playing. So these are the 4 elements that represent everything. In the old version of the tarot deck, which I love, the first card of the tarot deck is the Fool. You got to be crazy to come onto this planet. So they push you on the edge. You're like, what? And the first thing you do is you land with the High Priestess. And she goes, okay, card number 1, stop, do a prayer, and be thankful you landed here. And then the second card of the deck is the Magician sitting with all 4 elements on a table. And this is the entrance of reality. So I'm returning people back to an old system that got left out for some reason. I don't know why we left it behind, but I'm doing my best to recover this wisdom that was brought to us by the ancients. Astrology is 5,000 years old.
Well, I wonder if it's tied into the head being detached from the stick figure. Did the Hopi, in your learnings, did you discover why the head detached?
Well, there was it's funny you asked that. There, in the Hopi prophecy, there's this symbolic, it's very interesting, was on the walls in Arizona that described it. And they showed a hole right before the guy lost the connection with his head and his body. But the more important question was, does the head get back on the body? And they didn't know. They simply predicted that we were at the point in modern history where we were disconnected. There was another hole right in front of us. There was these holes. And it was up to us to decide as a collective, will we make it back to reverence, to sacred energy with the elements, or will we continue to get stuck in our head, become an AI, an internet monster who lives on the side of a telephone and forget that we know how to kiss? I mean, that's a scary thought.
So scary. Another one of my shamanic experiences suggests that the disconnect happened. It started to happen when Westerners started telling a fiction that we are separate from nature. And as that fiction got embedded into us, that was like the birth of colonial mind, colonialism, which pulled us into our head.
Into industrialism. Yeah. So everything becomes a button. We forgot what our real hearts are. We forgot how to touch. To me, it's a simple fix. Take off your shoes. Remember to actually give thanks for the water, the food, pray over your food. I mean, it can look spiritual, I call it, or religious, but I don't let a moment go by in my day that I'm not in a prayer position. I mean, at first I didn't like being in a body, and I thought this planet was mean. And I found this planet really awful because I grew up in such a difficult situation where it was so traumatic. And then I recovered. This is what my life's work is. And this is what I have a project called Tell Me a Story. It's a 4-week writing class. And in that, the first prompt is, what did you leave behind? Like, where did you lose your contact with the kid who loves being alive? So if you're ambivalent, if you're listening to this podcast and you're ambivalent, if you're being honest and you're like, I don't really like this planet. This is one of my songs that I used to sing like a broken record. I was a whiner. I don't like being here. I want to go home. I used to say that all the time. And then one day under a full moon, I had a shamanic healer, say to me, would you stop with that line? And he caught me and I was like, what line? He was like, all you ever say is you want to go home. And that was the day I unpacked. And I thought, you know what? This is a one-way ticket. Like, you're here, you're not going anywhere. You may as well unpack, like stay. And that turning point, while it was unnatural to me, like I didn't really want to stay, I had to work it through therapy and reclaiming my decisions and going back to what I left behind. This is the elemental. At that moment, I realized that my water was dirty, that my emotional body, my water, had so much pain from my childhood that I couldn't be present in the here and now. So that's what therapy is about. That's your work, Wendy, I'm sure, is helping people clean out what kept them from being alive and kicking in the here and now. Would that be accurate? Is that something you do?
Yeah, I would say that's pretty accurate. Looking at those narratives that are playing out that aren't serving us, and but they're there for a reason, right? I mean, we all create them because we think we have to, or we get by somehow. It helps us.
Well, from astrology's point of view, everyone comes in with karma. I can look at your chart and very quickly see where the karma is. What's the internal dialogue that you keep repeating that says, I don't really like my body, or I don't really like people, or I don't really think I'll ever have money, or whatever their story is. And then I interrupt. Excuse me, commercial break, looking at your chart. Excuse me, you did not have to buy that lie. And then when I give them back the new story, it's especially in a school. I have a school where twice a year we have an astrology school, and they take a 6-week class, and literally I get presents mailed to me and letters from husbands saying, my wife has finally come back. Because once you see your chart, you understand what you agreed, what you left behind. And then suddenly there's a reactivation, and those healing, that narrative you spoke to, the stupid story. I call them stupid stories in my book. Once you get to your stupid story, you're like, that is so old. And that's what I had to do to myself when I realized I kept saying I wanted to go home. Like, no, Deb, you're staying here, and you may as well stop that shtick.
You signed up. See it through.
Yeah, you like take some choice factors in here. You signed up. You weren't pushed on the bus.
Well, I think one of the challenges is that those narratives are so deeply unconscious that most people aren't even aware that those stupid stories are playing out in their psyche.
Yeah, I think half of it is, you know what I think half of it is? We're not built to be happy. And in my culture, being raised as a young Jewish girl, and everybody went, oi, all the time. Everything was oi. I started getting miserable so young, and I'm not a miserable soul, but I was a miserable personality because of the oi factor. And then when I caught it, and I was like, wow, I'm captured by a narrative that was put in place by my upbringing, and I have a vote here. I have choice. And everyone listening, you have a choice right now. You can change your narrative. It's real. And it's not as complicated as I think long-term therapy can rehash the same story over and over again. I like to insert.
Oh, yes.
And that's where astrology comes in. Like, I'm thinking of a client who came in, and she was a Taurus and super shy. And she's now works for our company. And she was telling me the story about how self-conscious she was and how she didn't like her body. And I looked at her chart, and she had a grand trine in fire. She had all this fire. And I was like, wait a minute. Tell me about when you were a kid. Oh, I was a super athlete, and I had this unbelievable energy. And then my mother died, and everything went. I was like, wait. So you left yourself, this grand trine of fire is waiting in the back room with all this chi. Now she exercises. Now she's part of our school. Her energy completely shifted, and she's being her real self. So you don't know. I think you're right. The narratives that get wrapped up around our wounding, they sublimate and they depress. This is what depression is. You push down your natural. And my natural, I have a kid in me, even though I'm old. And I didn't used to have the kid in me. My kid got squished as a kid. It got put out. And then as I became more and more shamanic and astrological and looked at my chart, and I was like, where'd she go? And now I let her come out every day. Come out, Deb.
It doesn't show.
Yeah, well, you can't tell, but it was a long time coming.
No, I'm kidding.
If you saw pictures of me when I was a kid, I was so old and grumpy, and I was so sad.
You're old lady.
I was an old lady. There's some people, I was old when I was young. I came in very serious.
Yeah, I flipped too. I was that way when I was younger. I feel like I've regressed, and I'm much more immature than I was when I was a kid.
I love that. Me too. And it feels so much better.
Yeah, it does. So how did the elements come into play so strongly in your practice?
As soon as I found the elements, and I was so young, I was living in Vancouver. I found this spiritual group. It's kind of embarrassing. I was in one of those stupid spiritual groups, but they handed me I don't like talking about that part, but they handed me the elements at a very young age.
That makes me want to ask.
I know. You're going to ask. I found an elemental wisdom keeper at a very young age who was dressed up in a cult. But I left the cult, and I kept the elemental wisdom. And I swear to you, as soon as I realized the value of understanding how to do the elements, sincerely do them, not study them, but do them, my life became magic.
What do you mean by do them?
Like every day I meditate. I'm not a natural meditator because I used to have way too much. I'm a Gemini, so my mind never stopped. And I had to teach myself, like, would you shut up? Like, okay, we're going to practice 5 minutes, just 5 minutes of turn off the noises. This is water, the element of water. And you're going to learn how to do nothing on purpose. Well, for a Gemini who wiggles all the time, being relaxed was as far away from me. So I had to learn, that's the embodiment. And then air is very natural to me. Can you hear the wind?
Yes, I see your hair's blowing.
Yeah, I'm in love with the wind. So air is very natural to me, and it came quickly for me to learn how to communicate and ask a lot of. I ask a lot of questions, like you do. I asked a lot of questions. I was endlessly curious. Like, so that one was easy, but the earth one, which I do daily, was hard for me. Like cleaning, organizing, spreadsheets. This was unnatural for me to make food. I could live on cereal and never cook. Like if I was being my real self, I'm kind of an airhead, tell the truth. But I deliberately chose to learn how to do my tax. It wasn't very fun, but now I do my taxes. And now I talk every month to a financial person, and I act like I know what he's talking about. I mean, I fake it. I fake the whole thing. And now I'm getting really good at faking it. So I learned how to cultivate the elements with the decision. And fire was as natural. Fire for me was kind of a problem because I have a little too much energy. So that one wasn't hard, but the water and the earth was hard. And so you learn. And now I literally make an effort to label where my clothes go. It's so unnatural. You have to do, the name of this book, The Missing Element, is something you're missing. So you have to go recover it, and then you have to cultivate it. And in the book, there's a test, and you find out what your missing element is. Then you go and you read that chapter. And I swear to you, it's like 4 wheels in a car. If one of the wheels is down, the whole system goes off. So you want to keep all 4 wheels up, and it requires you to go do it wasn't natural for me to do earth. That was, I was just happy talking. I was just an astrologer that had millions and millions of sessions. And then I had to figure out how to put them all in spreadsheets. And then I had to hire someone because I didn't know how to do it. And then eventually I thought, you know what, you're going to learn how to do this, Deb. Come over here. Like, kind of like a mom would. My observer realized that I was ungrounded.
So what did you notice when you started incorporating more earth into your life?
Well, now I have 50 employees in my company, and I run a multi-million-dollar company that is so much fun because I can't really say I'm good at earth. Let's go there. It's not true. I hire people who are good at earth, but I did make a bridge between me being terrible at it and me practicing it, and then me hiring experts. So it shows up now in my business.
Do you think that part of the healing process is just figuring out what element is missing and then acknowledging it and then figuring out a strategy to address it? So it might not mean that you have to all of a sudden become brilliant at finances, but understand like, oh, I suck at this, so I need to find some people to help me with it so that it's not a thing that's sort of getting in the way and hindering my process. Is that kind of what
100%, yes. So I was just looking at your chart, Wendy, and you're very balanced.
That's good.
Yeah, you have all 4 elements. And you're also, you've got a lot of Pisces, so you're chameleon-like. You can blend. You can dance with people. You know how to take on other people's energy when needed, so you can absorb them and receive them. But generally, you're very balanced. I too was very balanced, but in order to be successful, see, in my life, this lifetime, I've decided to run at very high level of intensity. Like I really wanted to eat this life alive. I'm not kidding. I wanted to eat this life alive. So I live in Hawaii and I make a very deliberate effort to get on my knees and do the sun and the prayers and the water. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I'm not very good at lukewarm.
Somehow that's not surprising.
I'm not, so I inspire other people to turn up the volume. Like, come on, make it a little louder. Come on, make it a little fun. Come on, spend a little more. As long as you're balanced, you don't want to get too much. But yes, my whole life's work is I'm a fire starter. You are too, by the way, in your chart. I get people excited, and I say I'm a cheerleader. I mean, I did get kicked off the cheerleading squad for kissing my boyfriend, but other than that, I was a really good cheerleader.
Well, I mean,
that's not a bad thing to happen when you're in 12th grade. She said the cheerleading captain of the team said, "You're out." I was late twice. And I said, you know what? It's okay. I was a senior cheerleader. I was done. And it was for a very good reason. But I definitely learned the skills of how to get super excited, jump up and down, and tell people how good they're doing. That's one of my roles this life.
Yeah, I would say you're probably a natural.
That's why I didn't have to stay on the cheerleading squad. Let me out of here.
Yeah,
I don't want to hang around jumping up and down. Yes, that's true. And that's what you find out. You have a lot of fire too, Wendy. Can you relate to that? You get excited?
I do get excited, but I don't know if it comes across in the same way that it might with you.
No, because your rising sign, your soul is water. Your Pisces, you know astrology at all?
A little bit, yeah.
So your rising sign, the rising sign is the soul, and your soul is water. So you are here to heal and bless and be gentle, even though your personality is fire. So there's a little bit of a conflict. You've got a lot of fire subdued by your water. I have a lot of fire encouraged by my air, so I can't really turn my. You add air to a fire in the fireplace, and what
makes more
happens?
fire. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you get me going, don't get me going, Wendy. I'm trying to control myself.
I'd actually like to get you going now.
No, don't.
Very much so.
See, you're encouraging me to be wild. I would say if you ask me my wildest, I'm going to give you a wild story. That part of my gift is I say things that you shouldn't say. And totally being politically incorrect, say I have Tourette's, but I found out that's really bad to say. But what my success has been that I say things to people and to clients in the best with my heart open in ways that no one else can get away with it. And then the fire starts and then transformation begins. So that's my specialty.
Right. Well, I mean, it's all about your intention, right? You're not trying to be an asshole. You're just... Right?
No, I'm just telling the truth.
Yeah.
So that's one of the qualities of fire. I tell the truth in a way that's heartfelt. I'm not trying to disrupt or poke. I'm just trying to speak to I'm trying to think of an example. I like giving examples, but I'm thinking of, here's one. I was sitting, this is so sad. I was sitting with the client and I had students watching me, and this man was talking about his marriage and that he was kind of compromised. He was in a marriage where there was no more sexuality. He was a very handsome man. And we were working together in a group setting. And then I looked at his chart and saw he had a lot of fire. And I was like, wait, let's do this once more. So you're in a marriage where you're not allowed to move your fire? And he was like, yeah, I've come to accept that. And I just looked him straight in the eyes and I went, bullshit. You're not accepting that. You're compromised. And he went, oh, and I said, can I just be really blunt? I think you're full of shit. And then everybody looked over at him. And then he got defensive for a minute. And I said, listen, I don't mean to be offensive, but I'm looking at your chart.
That means you hit the nail on the head.
Yes. And then by the end of the session, he was crying and he said, I've given away a part of myself in the name of compromise. And thank you for calling me out. And the next thing he knew, he went home and did therapy with his wife and changed his life. So it was this disruptive sentence of, I think you're full of shit, that was the catalyst. But all the students sitting around me were like, I can't say that. Well, if there's enough love in the room, this is good therapy. If the person feels safe with you, if they know your intention of using your fire is to open their heart, not to hurt them,
right?
Then there's value. But that's a very particular skill.
Well, you also had to develop some rapport first so that they know that where you're coming from. Like if you would just out the box say, hey, you're full of shit, I think that probably wouldn't have had the same impact.
I think you're right, Wendy.
Just a guess.
Yeah, one of your intuitive guesses that you're having. And then how do you go into rapport? Well, as an astrologer, you track and you pace with someone's rhythm. So if I'm working with someone who's got lots of earth, I'm going to talk slowly. If I'm working with someone with lots of fire, I'm going to get loud and funny really quick. So this is the dance of really good therapy for me, is not being a cookie cutter therapist where it's all the same, but actually looking at the chart of the person in front of me and saying, how can I serve you in your terms, on your language, in your body, so that I'm actually in rapport with you. And at the end of the session, the person comes to life because now they've been accepted. And that's really what my life's work is using the missing element, first figuring out what they are. I use the chart to assess the personality. Then I figure out what the missing element is with the test that's in the book, which you all can do as a beginner. Then I give them homework. And if they don't do the homework, I kick them out. Not really. But if you don't do your homework, if you're not willing to change, we can't play.
Well, you have to do the work, right?
Yep.
I think it would be easier if you did it for us, but.
And that's where the head comes back on the body. No, I can't do it for you. And
no, so it doesn't work that way.
There's so many examples in my head of clients where I see their lack of willingness. You probably see this. It's called resistance, where a client is resisting to do the change. I love when I do this with clients. When a couple comes in to see me, it's one of my favorites. A couple comes in to see me and they're in a divorce process and they're being really mean to each other. And I say, listen, I'm going to say something and you're going to have to believe me. If you don't clear this up in your next life, you're getting married again. They go, what? I go, if you don't clean this up properly, you will end up with this person. And that's such high motivation. And that's what it takes in this life. We need motivation. And that's what astrology does. It gives you the sad ending, the low road of what can happen to your chart if it goes wrong and you don't activate your real self. And it gives you the high road. What could happen if you were really yourself? and how life will change for the better if you give yourself back to who you really are.
That sounds
Sales
pretty.
pitch.
No.
I'll take two. I'll take two. I'd like two of those, please. I think I'll buy 3 of those books. Can I eat them?
Yeah, I was just going to say that sounds really fucking good. So,
A little bit of punctuation with a swear word by the fire sign. I like it.
oh, well, I'm not very professional.
No, you have a part of your chart that is a little bit, what should I say? Very authentic. Like if something doesn't feel real for you, you can't play. You're like a lie detector. You're like, you can test, touch and taste and touch situations and know whether or not they have substance. Is that true?
I would say it feels true. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if it's always turned up to 10, but like, it probably depends on where my head's at as to whether or not I feel like I can perceive bullshit or not.
I would say your body is a very good indicator that you're one of those people that don't you get body responses to people when you meet them?
Yeah. Yeah. I fall into that highly sensitive category. So I get overwhelmed really easily with lots of information in the environment. So learning over the years, having to sort through all of that. And
that's called Pisces. That was what you just described as 100%. So this is like water. I'll translate it for the book. If you're someone that gets overwhelmed by outward stimulation, better known as too many words, too much stimulation, too much noise, too many variables, that's water. That your nervous system goes ding, 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 ding. And the medicine for that is water, is permission to be alone and to go into a shower or a hot tub or a sauna or a pool or an ocean and just say, I need to be away from all of you and clean off my energy. That's a big piece of medicine for you, is permission to be alone.
Yeah, no, that's been an important part of my self-care. Absolutely.
But for some people, it's the opposite. If they have error and they don't talk to someone enough, or they don't feel like they're in a relationship, they get really funny. They have to have words to feel the connectedness, or they can't handle being alone without writing or journaling or communicating or being online, like listening to podcasts. Some people ground through sound. Not Pisces, not you.
I was just thinking about how the pandemic is really hurting so many folks who need that connection. The isolation is not, well, I don't think it works well for any of us, really.
Well, extroverts really hate it. Introverts were loving it. Like, oh my God, I don't have to go to the party?
But I've been hearing lately that introverts are saying, I mean, the last 2 weeks, I've had a handful of clients who are introverts say that, I was doing okay being alone because I was really enjoying it. I was thriving in isolation. I was like, oh, good, a pandemic, not because of the sickness, but because of the shutdown. And now they're getting to the point where they're saying,
not so much. Yeah, this is the gift of the book. You find balance, because even an introvert needs to come out and even the extrovert needs to go in. And that's what you learn about the missing element. It's very similar. And I think, yes, this pandemic, it's so crazy. As the astrologer looking at this moment in time, which was, by the way, not a full surprise to us, because the planets that were in position a year ago, March of 2020, we were all on the edge of our seat waiting to see. We didn't know it would be a virus, but we knew the government was up for a radical change. And yes, the president was a perfect situation for us to go, whoa! But when March came and the pandemic really hit, it was not a surprise to the astrologers. And still now we're predicting this will not end till the end of summer as far as the trauma drama demand that we change. And that's in the first chapter of my book. My book sold so much during the pandemic. It's so funny because the first chapter is called Crisis. Like that's how the book starts. Like we are in crisis, not only as individuals, but the planet itself. We have this thing called, I was just reading Greta last night, this thing called climate change that we are ignoring, but it's clearly at a make it or break it. We're in crisis. And what better way to wake us up than to throw us up against the wall? It's back to the resistance thing. We will resist.
That's how it works. Yeah.
I know. Why is that so mean? We have to learn through crisis.
Well, I think we're prone to ignoring shit, right? So we need to get our cages rattled a bit in order to pay attention. Otherwise,
it makes me sad.
We'll just keep going the way we've been going.
So what rattled your cage, Wendy?
When?
And during the COVID, did your cage get rattled?
During COVID? What rattled my cage was this is a strange story. I ended up likely contracting COVID in March of last year. a couple days after I closed down my wellness center, I contracted symptoms, and I don't typically get sick. And this was a very strange feeling sickness. It felt like my body was dealing with something it had never dealt with before. And I got mild to moderate symptoms, but lost sense of taste and smell. And that was before they really understood that those were symptoms, and some challenges with breathing, but I didn't get a cough, had fever and chills for about 3 days, 4 days. And then 3 weeks later, I had a very sharp pain in my left eye. And actually, it happened 2 days in a row. At the same time of day, I got this really sharp pain in my eye that shot over to my temple. It was like an intense ice cream headache. And then as the weeks went on, my eye felt very strange. How it was processing light got weird. It just didn't feel right. And then I was starting to trip and fall. My field of vision was getting less. And it turned out that I had severe glaucoma in response to a parasitic infection that had emerged in my eye called toxoplasmosis, which is the parasite that typically we contract from cats. Anyway, so I had lost most of the vision in my eye because it was so highly infected and inflamed, and because I couldn't get care for it because everything was shut down. When I finally was able to get care, they put me on 10 weeks of antibiotics and steroids, which was a beast. My body was like, what?
Wow.
Yeah, but my vision returned and the inflammation is almost gone. I have a slight distortion that's probably going to be permanent because my retina, I guess, got wrinkled from the inflammation. But yeah,
Did your taste and smell come back?
Yeah, that came back. My brother-in-law, who's a pulmonologist, suggested that having the COVID experience is likely what brought this latent infection or parasite out, and for some reason in my eye. Although I had a lot of shamanic experiences that relate to cats that tied right into it. So it was all this really like kind of interesting karmic stuff. Yeah, that I won't bore you with, but that was my big
It doesn't sound
challenge.
boring to me. That was fascinating. My goodness. So your body really took it and you had an opportunity to go in.
Yeah, and it was brilliant in a lot of ways. I mean, I didn't like the experience of having the eye issue, but all of the things that happened as a result, and then the ripple effects of that experience,
yes,
promoted some deeper healing on some levels I never would have gotten to had that not happened.
I know. So that's what COVID was good for. Things you never would have had happen.
So what is your hope for people who read your book?
Wait, I don't want to leave that story behind.
Okay.
That was a big story you just told us. I feel like you just opened the door for, this is one of the wounds, and this is part of my book, the first chapter being crisis. The collective pain body is something I've been very aware of, that there's 500,000 people died. I don't know. Anytime I touch the collective pain body about COVID, because I too was exposed to it, everybody was exposed to it, my heart opens. And I want to just say that your story was you, of course, did such a rich internal discovery of yourself. You took it to your advantage. And this is what my book is about. Like, whatever life has handed you, and there are as many stories as there are people. The first chapter in my book, I say, this is the unprecedented time ever on Earth, because there's never been 7.5 billion people. We've never had this many people on the Earth, and we've never had these unbelievable electronic devices that make us seemingly connected. So we're in this unprecedented time, said the astrologer, and crisis is upon us. There's no question we're in crisis. We try to pretend we're not. So my intention to your question is to kind of get a soldiers and an army of people that stand up and say, listen, I'm comfortable being me. I can handle just what you said. I can handle the stress. I'm equipped to do the inner work, to navigate through these really bumpy parts where I'm feeling so scared, because I know me. And I know, for example, I am built with fire, so I'm super resilient. But if I know someone's built with water, I'm going to say to them, you know what? I got you. You stay home, you cook, you play house, you keep the safety realm. I'll go out and face the front lines. So it's knowing ourselves enough, because my prediction is the planet is going through a huge birthing and a death. And while we don't talk about it, the death part is what I see everywhere. And I think death, it's such a negative word. We've got such a bad rap, and I happen to love it. It's kind of like, here I go again with my Tourette's. I love death. You're not supposed to say that, but I love death. So we're in a death process. And my job as an astrologer in the book, The Missing Element, is if you were dying, who do you want in the room? And how do those people, how conscious are they of their role, their function? How able am I to play my role in the tapestry of this life with such vivid color that I can be there for Wendy and Wendy can be there for me, and I can meet my neighbor and be accepting or say, you know what, I don't like my neighbor. I'm going to step over here because I'm aware enough to know that we don't match our personality. So there's enough acceptance. My fantasy of this work is we all learn to celebrate diversity, and that the changing of the guards, which clearly the planet's changing, doesn't mean that we're separate and there's them and there's us. Astrology says we're all in this together. What you just said, the Earth said, well, I'm going to survive. I don't know about you humans, but if you could identify with the elemental holy land of the privilege of being alive, you might change your attitude and remember that your function is to grow. Every one of you listening, you made a promise. You'd come down here and you'd grow. You would not fall asleep in the middle of the movie. You would not take a, side step in the back room and sneak out and go get high and drink and eat and, do all those stupid things people do when they're not doing anything else. Get on the bandwagon and help us in this transition because she's sick. We're not in a healthy zone. How's that?
Yeah, I think you summed up quite a bit.
Chocolate block full. Yeah.
Right there. Well said, Debra.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I don't want us to go out with a whimper. I want us to go out. We're making a transition. The planet is changing. Nothing's wrong. The prophets knew this was happening. All the astrologers predicted this thousands of years ago. However, we fell asleep and forgot who we are. We don't speak the language of the elements. We don't speak the cosmic language of astrology. We left the sacred. We forget to pray. We forget to meditate. We forget to heal. I don't know. We're goofy.
We lost our connection with the natural
world. Our
head
came off the stick.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's what I think, to me, that's a big part of what this global dismemberment is about. It's about
global dismemberment.
Remembering. Yeah. That's what I've been calling it. This death and rebirth process. All the things that have been hidden are being revealed so that we can look at them and make friends with them and address them and then evolve as a result.
Wow, that's profound. A global dismemberment. Like you mean as a collective, what do you mean by that?
I mean that every system on the planet is having to break down to die in order to be either reorganized or reborn.
I agree.
So that death and rebirth process, it's happening on every level, global, nationally, regionally, with community systems, family systems, relationships, and then with the individual. I think you can run, but you can't hide. Each one of us is having to see these hidden aspects of ourselves come to the foreground. And so having tools like what you've offered through your book are brilliant, right? As tools to help us
get the soldiers, get the army, get back in the front lines, be able to play with life and not stay in the back room.
Right. Or feel completely disoriented once you go into crisis and not know what the hell to do. I mean, so many people are seeking and searching right now because I think a lot of us are feeling lost, don't know what to do. And there's lots of different tools out there to help people hopefully steer their focus back inward.
That's what the stars are. The stars, they've been steering us across time. It's the stupidest story. Why did we leave astrology behind? It's the goofiest thing. I don't even want to answer that question. But the short answer is it's waiting for you. And I have a school and I have a program called Tell Me a Story. And there's ways for you guys to get reacquainted. I put a video out every day on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube where I remind you, where's the moon today? If you just start paying attention, that's one of the simple ways that was used across time to have us not be lost. How to not be lost. Where's the Northern Star?
Exactly. How do you navigate? So how do people find you then?
Debra Silverman Astrology. You can go on Instagram. You can go on YouTube. You can go on Facebook. I'm everywhere. Oh my God. I have a large platform and my goal is to help other people become astrologers. That's one of my favorites, especially therapists. I just wish every therapist was willing to consider the word karma. It's not just the imprint of your childhood, although that's essential. The question is, what was the agreement you made before you got here that was put in place?
The bigger picture.
Yes, by that chart. And then how do you work with the chart to turn it into a gift.
Beautiful. I will put links in the show notes so people can access you. And I want to thank you so much for coming on. This was really fun.
I'm so glad. Thank you for sharing your story. Just that human dimension of you getting sick and all those scary things that happen to you not being. I always like when life shows up in real life, live time. It's not theory. And that's part of, in my program, Tell Me a Story. People get to write from the direct experience, and you get to hear their. I don't know. I get so excited when I hear real life stories.
I get very excited about story too.
Okay, well, come to Tell Me a Story. Every month I do a group of people. It's online, so there's a landing page on my website of Tell Me a Story. I'd love it, Wendy, because it's learning. The elemental conversation is steeped in Tell Me a Story. It's not just writing. It's writing from the elements' point of view and finding out what your missing element is. I just repeat myself. I'm like a broken record. I've been saying the same thing for 50,000 lifetimes, but apparently I'm getting better at it.
Story is important. It's vital. That's how we grow. That's how we learn.
Ellie Wiesel said, you know why God created us? Because she loves stories. So beautiful.
Well, on that note, thank you so much for coming on.
My pleasure. That was delightful.
All right. Well, if you're ready to figure out what element could use a boost in your life, I hope you'll check out Debra's book, The Missing Element: Inspiring Compassion for the Human Condition. You can learn more about Debra and her work at debrasilvermanastrology.com. Well, that does it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.